Ben Rivers is an artist filmmaker, loosely anthropological. His films wander through uncanny landscapes, capturing fragments of possible utopias on grainy, hand-developed 16mm. In Slow Action, Rivers reports back from 4 fictional islands. The poetic sci-fi narrative is written independently by Mark von Schlegel and assembled later. A cool wind blows through the gap between what we see and what we hear. And in a spell to ward off the darkness, Ben Rivers teams up with his American counterpart, Ben Russell, to create, I quote, a radical proposition for utopia in the present. A pensive man appears to travel across Scandinavia, beginning in an Estonian commune, continuing through the forests of Finland, and concluding at a black metal gig in Norway. For all its abstraction and narrative looseness, it's a well-funded endeavour, giving the two Ben R's free rein to linger and lounge, assuming their sophisticated viewers will play ball. You're listening to MoobTube, a podcast that frequently plays with its balls. Oh, did you stay the course for this meandering voyage?
I could smell every waft of warm Kronenberg. I was there in the bathtub. Is that guy who's sort of going to fat Scandinavian guy, jumped in and then in broken English said, "Ladies, why will you join me?" Yeah, I was there for it. I've had a complicated relationship to Ben Rivers.
You're not talking anymore.
I think spurred this. We're not. Ben Rivers enters the documentary landscape very consciously in the wake of Grissom and British documentary filmmakers, Robert Flaherty, because fundamentally he's motivated by anthropology, and over his career I think he's I studied ethnographic film basically, so there's some really interesting people like Jean Rouch, and you could say actually that Ben Rivers is kind of more like Jean Rouch than Robert Flaherty, because he's a bit more exotic and a bit more kind of sassy than the kind of clinical nature of John Grissom's film. But anyway, so he is fundamentally known for doing a kind of very slow documentary style filmmaking, which simply put blurs the boundaries between the real and the fictional. It's got kind of sidle echoes actually from last week's episode, and I think one thing you overwhelmingly get the impression of from Ben Rivers' film is that like he's very productive, like he's created a huge range of films, which actually leads you to some nice surprises, because you've got things like The Hunchback, which is such an unusual inclusion in his oeuvre.
Yeah, it's a half-hour film. I didn't mention it in my intro, but it's a half-hour film about a kind of medieval LARP that goes wrong, and it figures out something like a cross between Pasolini and Black Mirror.
Yeah, it's almost Chris Morrisian in its energy of these like vox pops that it uses. But yeah, it's this dystopian kind of comedic project that was done with Abrantes. So it's a collab, and he does a lot of collabs. When Ben Rivers is on his own, he's a lot more measured and kind of intellectual, I think. So like something like 2 Years at Sea, which is a kind of a portrait study of a guy called Jack, who's like a drifter who lives in the woods. So it's a very slow black and white film about him, very grainy again, as Jack does like day to day habits and routines, some of which are real, like chopping wood or cooking dinner, and some of which are kind of like fictive, like, you know, his it appears that his heart has been hoisted into the trees and he opens his door and he's in the trees and it's normal, like there's bits like that. So yeah, he's a weird guy, like weird guy.
Fucking weird.
He's a very weird man. He's a very kind of prolific filmmaker who is very open to surprise and experimentation, but you kind of know when you're watching a Ben Rivers film, don't you? Like quietly he's kind of dominated a particular kind of artist film, but you come from an artist film background. You're much more in that world than I am. I'm just watching from the cupboard or the closet. I'm watching from the closet while you're out there. Yeah. So what's your take on Rivers, like in that space, and also as like a kind of more conventional filmmaker, because he has kind of overstepped the bounds of like artist film a fair bit as well. Maybe Spell to Lord of the Darkness is more like an art film than an artist film.
Yeah, I suppose in my career as a as a artist, moving imagey person, sometimes Ben Rivers' position in that world is quite senior and quite he's the person, he's quite trad in a way. He makes work on 16mm. Excuse me. That's what I think about 16.
That's very
That's
trad.
what I think about 16mm.
You lager loud, Ralph. You lager loud. This episode is brought to you by Chuwamba Wamba.
What's that?
I get knocked down. I'll get back up again. We'll play it in. We'll play it out.
Sorry, I'm too young to get that joke.
Fuck off. It's my 33rd birthday tomorrow. No, day off.
Many happy returns. Is it tomorrow?
No, Friday. I got mixed up. That's what happens when you go.
But when people hear this, it'll be tomorrow.
Exactly, actually. So cut that.
But very cleverly done. Yeah, basically Ben Rivers. Yeah, basically I think he's all right, isn't he? He makes quite beautiful films. Some of them are interesting, some of them are boring.
Yeah.
I personally don't really connect very much with what he's doing, and I find it a bit derivative.
Yeah. Derivative of who? And actually,
Chris Marker, mostly.
Chris Marker. So let me ask you questions. Derivative of who, and of his films that you've seen. What do you connect with, and what don't you connect with, and why? What's I want to know the break points to you.
Yeah, so I feel like because he's someone who wears his influences so much on his sleeve, it's almost like a reflection of you, which influences you see the most. So I feel like watching Slow Action, for instance, I saw very much this Chris Marker feeling of using voiceover as a kind of distancing, poetic device that makes you that mystifies footage that might otherwise not be that mystifying. And it kind of creates this. I just found it really difficult to concentrate on because there was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. There's a real obvious. It's not surprising to me at all that the narrative was written completely independently of the filming process, and that the filming process didn't really kind of direct or ask for very much. It just sort of wandered around, which is fine. It's a perfectly great way to do things, but I think you have to be prepared for something that's quite easy to walk in and out of, which makes sense because it has been shown in galleries.
I've seen quite a few of his films on a gallery wall, kind of projected on a gallery wall.
Which I think creates a different experience. The Hunchback is a more narrative piece, has this more like Chris Morrissey sort of narrative-y feel. It feels more like a piece of satire, but that's I think largely down to Gabriel Abrantes, whose film Diamantino I saw a couple of years ago.
He's definitely made Abrantes. He's kind of calmed Abrantes down. It's like a Ben Rivers interpretation of an Abrantes film. Sorry.
Whereas Ben Russell, I've seen films by Ben Russell, and A Spell Toward of Darkness also feels like Ben Russell calmed down. I think that's what Rivers does. He's like a sedative. He's like a chamomile tea. Whenever he collaborates with someone, he just makes their vibe a lot less like aggy and loud.
Yeah.
Which is not really that exciting to me, to be honest. I watched a clip of that film he did about the sloth. I mean, the fact that he did a film about a sloth sort of says
tells you everything, really, doesn't it?
I want to be generous about Ben Rivers, partly because I feel this weird sort of like parasocial connection to him, in that he is a English video artist person. He's very much in my industry. He's very associated with Lux, which is an organization I really like and respects the work of. Hustle. I feel very sort of hustled into liking Ben Rivers. I don't really like his films that much.
Oh no! I mean, it's interesting because I this is what I was saying to you the other week. So I was like, well, there's a lot I like about Ben Rivers' aesthetic at times. Like Slow Action is a lot visually. Kind of speaks to my visual and aesthetic concerns. I think you're right about chamomile tea because he can be quite boring in a way that people like Lav Diaz maybe or Bellatar, we talk a lot about slow, boring cinema.
Indeed.
And it's like they're differently because the film is the whole world for them. Like the moment of the film, the cinematic moment is the whole world that you're kind of seeing and kind of drinking at that moment. Whereas Ben Rivers, he'll refer to, you're very aware of his kind of references, or you're very aware to a voiceover or a narrative outside of the film. and it kind of can pull you in different ways. And I think one of the things it's weird. I find myself in a situation where I feel kind of hustled, as well, because I want to like Ben Rivers a lot more than I maybe do, because there's elements and moments of it which are really transportive. I think Spell to Ward of the Darkness does that, but it's kind of hampered by this confused concept about this figure who's moving through different spaces of extremity, which is Robert Aubrey Lowe, who's a musician known as Lycan. I think you pronounce it Lycan or Lycan. But the film's kind of like blurb describes it as Lycan is like Robert Lowe moving through from a commune in Estonia to a wood in Finland to like death metal concert in Oslo. So it's three kinds of community, three kinds of like relationship to the environment, three kinds of extremity, because they're quite extreme situations that he's in. But he's not really present in the first part at all, and he's barely present in the second, and kind of sidelined in the third, maybe a little bit. Like Ben Rivers doesn't seem to really commit to Lowe as a character. Lowe is really good because he's got quite an expressive, quite compassionate face.
A face you can kind of project a lot onto, maybe.
Yeah, definitely, because he's got this really thoughtful, slow way of kind of imbibing things around him. But for a lot of the first third of the film, we're stuck with these really fucking irritating middle-aged hippies in this Estonian camp. But you don't meet Lowe until maybe properly until like 20 minutes in or so you're never really on his journey, so it feels like the kind of blurb kind of undermines the film and kind of strangles your ability to understand what you're seeing. And I think if it just committed to him as a musician and been more of a straight up portrait of Lowe as a musician, and why had he gone to, I know one thing that Ben Rivers has said in interviews is one thing that I respect, this is one thing he said is, he likes to leave traces or unexplained traces in his films that kind of point towards justifications and motivations beyond the film in life, and those are points of kind of curiosity and interpretation, and that's interesting. And I agree with that. Like it's interesting to make people wonder why Lowe is in this. Why is he in a wood in like Finland? Why is he living in this heart shack? What led him to this place? But it doesn't do it in a compelling enough way for me, and it's like
it doesn't give you any why.
No, you can't get into that. Yeah, you can't get into that Pandora's box.
Yeah, I found it weird because also I was watching it on my projector in my flat, and one of my flatmates who's a musician kind of wandered over towards the screen and said, "Oh, that's my mate Rob," and I was like, "Oh, okay, who's Rob? What's the story?" And he told me all about Robert Aubrey Lowe and his work, how he did noises on arrival, that with working with Johansson, and how he's a musician and stuff. And I just sort of felt like, oh, this guy seems pretty interesting, and this film is like just using him like a kind of Bressonian model, just kind of shunting him around in various landscapes. Which feels
kind of to ruin the huge resource you've got there. Shout out to Psychic Nature of Being, by the way, his album, which is let me check. That is 2005. Wow, that's a long time ago, but it's a really, really good piece of music. Anyway,
he makes that under Lycans.
It says under Lycan. But yeah, he's got a really interesting life, and it's like sometimes you need to give us a bit more to go on. Like, give us a bit more. Like I appreciate the kind of leaving things ambiguous and having these tendrils of motivation that sit outside of the film, but I need something to climb into. Like,
didn't they just basically have a great time and then then sort of collage it into something?
Yeah, and it's like, oh, that's so student, mate. Come on, that's like,
and I feel like they maybe sort of they maybe sort of abstracted it more as a way of like compensating for the fact that it was quite personal. And in doing that, they kind of crushed out the thing that might have been more interesting. I mean, the most engaging bit for me was when the white dudes are sat together talking about the orgy they have.
Yeah, super
weird. Where
they
put their fingers in each other's bums in the sauna, and you can't tell whose fingers in your. I mean, I think you probably no. It's a sauna, isn't it? Because there's steam everywhere, so you You can't see who's got their
Ralph,
finger up
Ralph
your
is
bum.
referring to a scene in the Estonian commune part of the film.
Ralph has gone mad.
Ralph is referring to a thing that happened entirely in his head.
Ralph thinks about this every night.
It's the only way I can get off.
But he did not realise.
Meanwhile, this is how things really work.
We'll be talking about Adam
fingers
Curtis
were up their arseholes. No, there is a scene between these two guys, these two dudes, sitting outside a sauna, chatting about an orgy that one of them was at. And it's kind of, I alluded to it last week.
That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about, yeah.
The finger is firmly up the arsehole, but it's kind of a cringy scene, but kind of interesting. These characters and what they reveal about themselves through these kind of fragmentary, difficult conversations are, mostly speaking through a second language, are interesting.
So tell me, Owen, because I think your aesthetic and intellectual sensibility is more attuned to Rivers' work than mine is, just through virtue of us being different people, having different interests. And I feel like, a certain specific part of this work, particularly slow action, really resonates with you, your sense of geography and your feeling towards like that sort of essayistic approach to spaces and kind of utopias, imagined worlds. Tell me a bit more about your the way that you vibe Rivers when he's good.
Yeah. You've kind of hit it there, because there's elements of slow action where he imagines spaces over the top of other spaces. Like you said earlier, there's an island there's a Mediterranean island that he films on, which is very volcanic and very weird, and he kind of he uses kind of visual editing tools and effects to kind of imply magisterial transcendent spaces over the top of these quite banal ordinary spaces, which is completely my jam. And in that capacity, Rivers is really good at transporting you through the banal into something a bit more interesting and a bit more engaging. I really vibe with his blurring of the fictional and documentary. That's great, because the root of documentary film is fiction, because Robert Flaherty, Nanook of the North is held up to be one of the first proper documentaries. It was an ethnographic documentary, but most of the scenes in it were staged, and Nanook of the North played a big role in kind of fixing the popular image of like the Inuit, the Eskimo, the Inuit in the popular imagination. Even to today, we have an image of what the kind of Eskimo or Inuit is, and a lot of it was kind of condensed by Robert Flaherty through this film, and it was fictional. So the power of documentary is to give you the impression that what you're seeing is real and true, and often it's dressed up. And I think Ben Rivers at his best does that really well. He also, I feel like he doesn't. Yeah, that's the thing. It's annoying because you have flashes of this. So with slow action, slow action has this science fictional element to it, which I really enjoy. Like I said, the transformation of ordinary spaces into unusual other spaces, and the fact that it has a kind of extraneous lyric narrative or essay to it is again my vibe. It speaks to how I like to kind of conjoin different stories and narratives and spaces together. But yeah, I mean, he kind of lets that down at other times, because a lot of Spell Towards the Darkness is very boring. Very boring. He doesn't give us a motivation. I think perhaps the most powerful part of the film is probably the doom metal, like a death metal concert at the end. And it feels like that is a thing unto itself, and there's a world to explore there, and he's not giving it enough energy, really.
Yeah, and also by that point, I think, there's an element of having tuned out, I think.
Yeah. You've tuned out.
I shouldn't generalise. But I was, the metal concert, I could see the virtue of it, but I was fairly kind of uninterested by that point.
It's very long. It's a long sequence. I think it's about 35 minutes or so.
Yeah, it is like, and it's slow, in fact.
Yeah, despite being quite a rhythmic, fast piece piece of they play several songs during it. It was that band was assembled specifically for the film. Another piece of fiction by Ben Rivers, actually. I don't think that death metal is typically Lowe's kind of métier, but it's a few. There's some quite famous musicians, like death metal musicians, in that band that he kind of assembled, and the crowd was presumably assembled for the purpose as well. Yeah, I just feel there's always what makes Ben Rivers interesting is maybe it's the stuff you learn about his films after you watch them.
Yeah, so I read the booklet associated with it.
You got the film, didn't you? You got the.
I bought the film. I think it's a bit of a waste of money, really, to be honest.
Don't say that. You're in the pocket of big Criterion.
The Criterion would never touch this shit. But yeah, no, it's Soda Film and Art, which is since folded as an imprint. But they released a few Chris Marker films and a few sort of more recent artists' films. And there's a very nice booklet with an article, I can't remember the author, but it's they write an essay about bleakness, which is quite negative, but it kind of,
it's quite a leading way to look at the subject, isn't it? But
yeah, exactly. So it's a kind of, they've got an artist writer to write about the film, and this writer uses the frame of bleakness, and the final paragraph says, seeking solace among fellow sentient entities, the communal fix is just another expression of our inability to generate meaning concerning our existence.
Fuck off. Talk about projection. Because that's one thing you couldn't say.
The communal fix. Is that, sorry, mate. So, do you mean like hanging out with people?
Hang out, you mate. Oh my god, we live in a cursed time. Because it feel like for all the criticisms you could level at Spell to All of Darkness, it's quite an optimistic film, I feel.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't get a negative vibe off it at all. Like,
no,
you get the impression
utopias, isn't it?
Utopias, but very
it's about the utopia only exists in the moment, and so one must live in the moment.
One must live in the moment
and stuff.
Yeah, and you might not agree with that, especially those of us who've tasted the salty edge of various London communes, like Ralph and myself, in a hyper neoliberal, hyper normalized sense. You don't get a negative vibe with these films. Bleakness is not something I would attach to Spell to Ward Off the Darkness. If anything, it would be Contentment, which is something you get off 2 Years at Sea. And maybe even slow action, less slow action maybe, but you get a sense of kind of exploration and contentment, which is quite pleasant actually. Like the effect of his films is quite pleasant, like you said, chamomile tea. It's weird the things that people project on something. Like, I wouldn't call it bleak. In the world he evokes,
Paul J. Ennis. Ever heard
Paul
of him?
J. Ennis? Fuck off. Fuck off.
We're literally
he's
written for Zero Books. He wrote a book called Continental Realism for Zero Books. Obviously, he wanted someone to accidentally buy it, thinking they were buying capitalist realism.
C-list realism.
That's like when Normal People came out, and there was a book called Ordinary People that had like a very similar cover.
I'm really into the tricking people to buy the wrong book.
It happened with films a lot. You'd get Paranormal Activity came out, and then like before it came out on DVD, there was a straight to DVD film called Paranormal Entity that had like almost exactly the same cover.
So funny,
so cheeky.
I saw a really good. I'm going to do that thing where I talk about memes. Shout out to at Justin Baldaji, who did a Bad Lieutenant meme, and the scene where he's in the church and he's confessing to his crimes. Do you know the scene?
This is the first one, the Ferrara.
Yeah, the original, the Abel Ferrara film, rather than the Herzog version, where he is kind of exclaiming and confessing to the evil, bad things he's done. They've redone the subtitles as, I did a racism, I did an imperialism, I did a nationalism.
Can you send it to me?
I did a xenophobia, I did a white fragility, I did a weak apology. Then you've got this picture of Jesus. This is a 4-tile one. And the final one, I did a no growth. It's too good.
No growth. What does that mean when you don't grow as a person?
Yeah, you get cancelled, but you don't learn from it. But you don't really get a chance to learn from cancellation. So it's a kind of tautology, but whatever,
I've been off social media for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'm dripping poison in your ear, aren't I?
Yeah. I did go on Instagram for briefly to put my videos on there. But
yeah, that's a worthy use of it. You're like dropping a depth charge into the 6C of Instagram.
So I don't know what more I could sort of send for this guy Paul J. Ennis a bit more, but he's probably a bit depressed. Really, probably doesn't.
He might be depressed, pretty much.
Anyway, the other bit of the booklet is an interview with the two Bens, the Mercedes Benz. And I find Russell I guess it's because he's American. He's a lot more sort of forward and confident conceptually, and then like Rivers sort of says these kind of umming and erring things.
He's very English in that sense, isn't he? He's got colonial mentality to his films, not in the kind of surface of them, but in the way he communicates his films and choice of subject.
Yeah, man, he travels around the world and takes things from people. They both did a film in Vanuatu that is featured on the special discs of this special features of this disc. I'm not the sort of person that's going to scold, two middle-aged white men for, living out their dream of filming some beautiful shit around the world.
Props to you guys, like, honestly.
It's good work if you can get it. But, I do think, and, I don't think they're particularly problematic in that regard, but...
no, not at all.
I often talk about English filmmakers who dodge the question. When people say, "Oh, there's no good English filmmakers," and then someone says, "Oh, and then people will name all the English filmmakers who just left England and made Hollywood films, or like Hitchcock or Chaplin or Chris Nolan or Sam Mendes or Ridley Scott or whatever, or they'll name the ones that went to Europe, like Peter Strickland or Greenaway, or I'll do a quote from the Rivers Russell interview. We filmed this part, the commune part, over a few weeks on an Estonian island in a compound run by a 70-year-old shaman. You can hear his drums over the fire in the beginning. We always talk about the importance of the experience of filmmaking for our practices, that this is one of the reasons why we make films. I just noticing the phrase practice has really died during COVID. I think because everyone's just stuck at home. Like, it's a bit offensive to think of.
Well, I read this whole Instagram post of day about really irritating. It was like, your lockdown is not an artist retreat.
I know it isn't.
Okay. I know that.
I need to be told that.
Thanks. What the fuck? This isn't an artist retreat. I thought there was going to be a masseuse. I thought it was going to be. Oh no! I thought it was going to be like massage in the afternoon and Zazen Buddhism in the morning. What the fuck?
Hannah Gatsby coming back. We always talk about what did he say? It took a lot of looking around, searching, and hard work to arrive at the situation on the commune, and it was perfect when we did. In some ways, one of the most important outcomes of making a spell is that we're both now thinking about the very real possibility of living collectively.
No, you're not.
Do you think they did that, or do you think they're just in some ex-council flat in Homerton? Just listening to In Our Time.
In Our Time. Like, which one should we listen to today? Should we listen to the Bertrand Russell one? No, we listened to that of the week, remember? We said, I can't listen
I've spelt T on my...
Oh, Ben. I remember as well.
I'll just phone up other Ben.
They live... No, they're probably like landlords of a like a warehouse space in Tottenham that's like almost certainly burnt down several times, but they've kind of whitewashed the entire place, literally and metaphorically.
So Russell says it's so easy to discredit that sort of collective endeavour out of hand. So easy to say that these people are hippie idealists, that they are full of shit. It's easy. Mean, these people, any people who are choosing to live collectively, it's a sad legacy to inherit, to find ourselves in a moment defined by so much. Then Rivers chimes in, cynicism. Russell, the cynical relationship to possibility. We had a really difficult time editing the commune sequence because at first we were trying to reflect or represent our experience with a group of people that we really care about. Even that really irritating guy who's like trying to chat the woman with the baby. It took us a while to realise he's got like AK-47s on his like tank top.
And he's trying not to look at her titty when she's breastfeeding. Because
the baby's getting a good mouthful of
it. And it's all he can do to not... He gives himself a kind of like eye strain by trying not to look at it. It's an incredible...
Such a horny boy. Well, we've got that to look forward to. It took us It took us a while to realise that was in fact the wrong way to go about it. That cinema, as far as we understand it as intellectuals and as makers, you know, on this podcast, Owen, I just think of us as intellectuals and as makers.
I think of ourselves as
edgelords,
indigenous natives, walking
Saxon
through the bush,
natives.
the bush of the bush of praxis. That's
blowing the didgeridoo of critique. It took us a while to realise that was in fact the cinema for us, as we understand it, as intellectuals and as makers, is not the space of representation. It is not the space of documentation. It is the space. It is a space, not the space. Decentering, guys. It is a space of reconstruction. To repeat. It is not the space. Cinema is not the space of representation. It is not the space of documentation. It is a space of reconstruction. Please stay 2 meters apart and wear a face covering at all times.
But he also made The Sky Trembles and The Earth is Afraid and The Two Eyes Are Not Brothers, a 2015 film made by Ben Rivers, which was filmed in Algeria, I believe, or Morocco, in North Africa anyway.
Somewhere in North Africa, yeah. Egypt, no?
Egypt might have been.
I don't know.
But
I
again,
saw the exhibition that it was based on, but I haven't seen the film.
Yeah, it's highly fictionalized again around kind of North African cultures. I think.
But like three of them were making like really colonial films at the same time, and so they just
they are kind of quite colonial. There is a colonial element to his films, which is the idea of visiting extremities, which is almost like visiting. Descending upon the colonies and recording the exotic life there. It's Edward Said in a way.
I mean, they're the last generation of white dudes who are going to get money to do that.
Who are doing that.
Literally, like, I know that I want to do that.
The idea of these kind of, these colonial films, and I think there's merit to them. Like, there's nothing wrong with going to make a film in a completely alien culture and making a film from a perspective of culture shock and appropriation. I think it's actually okay to do.
We like it.
It's good. It can be good.
Andrew
I think
Cuomo making an appropriative
film. Ben Rivers he's looking at his passport and he's going, where haven't I been? He's going to make a film. He's going to make a film
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Is a place I haven't been.
With the Contras. No, he's going to make a film with Golden Dawn.
Without
it's an emotional journey.
My position.
What can we say? I think we should say something about Hunchback, because Hunchback is a kind of weird anomaly in the oeuvre of Ben Rivers. It's quite funny. Yeah,
I loved it when I first saw it, and then I found it a bit irritating this time around. I don't know why.
You only watched it once. I don't think I'm going to watch that again. But it's good because it's a dystopian film about it uses surprising kind of soft sci-fi elements of people who work for a company. It's an obligatory part of their kind of corporate de-stressing that they go on this kind of away week where they all basically dress up like they're randomly assigned a character from this medieval village and they have to basically be them, and they'll just kind of go a bit to seed, like one of them becomes a wench and one of them becomes a drunk, one of them becomes a hunchback.
It's like a HR bonding away day.
Absolutely, and it's based on an Arabian Nights tale about the hunchback, about the kind of reviled figure of the village who everyone believes they've killed accidentally, and he gets kind of passed from hand to hand, and everyone believes they've killed him, but it turns out he's not really dead.
But he is killed at the end when his head gets chopped off. No.
Yeah, in the story, in the Arabian Nights story, he survives.
Oh really? Okay, I didn't know that.
The barber removes the fishbone from his throat and he breathes again. But in this, his head's literally kicked off.
Yeah, that's quite funny.
Slapped off. It's very funny. There's a really good Chris Morrissey kind of like Vox Pop way of interviewing like these characters later outside of that environment, and it's funny. It's good. It's like it's got moments of Abrantes and it's kind of sassiness and its weirdness, and it's got moments of Ben Rivers and it's very beautifully shot. Like those are Ben Rivers shots. Those are the Ben Rivers money shots.
The Segway sunset shot. The
Segway sunset is phenomenal. It is.
I would say really it almost looked like it'd been faked, to be honest. But it does feel like the ratio of like the best thing you can say about this film is like the ratio of fun to watch to it was fun for them making it seems to be a little bit more
It's on a jolly.
A little bit more how it should be. I mean, they definitely enjoyed making it, and also like it's fun. It's quite fun to watch. Spells of Ward of Darkness, not fun to watch at all. And they obviously had a fucking great time.
Well, they got to go to Estonia in summer. They hung out at commune. They sucked each other off in a sauna.
Yeah. That's what I wanted, really. But
I think we have to respect the project of artist film because it is good. It doesn't really leak through into mainstream film and doesn't really leak through into art film, broadly conceived. But it's a useful area for kind of pushing. It's a good thing that people are given money to make stupid films that don't really mean much, because it kind of helps people to expand the craft, and useless things are useful to society as a whole.
Evelyn Beatrice Hall, it turns out, due to my Wikipedia searching just now, was the first wrote the phrase, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." which is a kind of quite
Ben, if you're listening,
quite an annoying thing that like liberals say. They don't really mean it about free speech.
But here you could say
tolerating fascists. But I would say in this case, I disapprove of what Ben Rivers is doing. But I will definitely, maybe not to the death, but
not to the death.
But I feel very strongly that he should be allowed to do it, and it's and it does carry virtue to it.
Yeah, you need people being a bit spectrum in the film world who are just making some films, and they might be a bit colonial and they might be a bit boring, but rather that than someone working at kind of Goldman Sachs.
Has he ever caught heat off this stuff? I just think he's so loved. Like everyone in that
he's
whole,
never got heat off it, but it would require you to overturn the tables in the temple of artist film, which no one's going to do.
I've heard people chat shit on I won't name names, but I was on the tube on the overground with some art moving image people, not that high profile, but like we're dissing Atlantis and dissing filmmakers in general who go to places and kind of turn it into a sci-fi thing, which is definitely what Ben Rivers, like he goes to Vanuatu and turns it into like a Beckett play. Like it's not really cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, is Vanuatu enough? It's North Africa, there's so not enough of a story for you to tell in Algeria. You could take. Well, I was doing some research earlier about Guillotat and the legacy of France conducting nuclear bomb experiments in Algeria is a really untapped space that would be really open for a really interesting documentary film that could still bend the rules of
but they don't give a shit
fact
about
and
that.
fiction, but it's too real. It's like no, it's actually just about my personal journey, and it's like we said,
my little utopian idea. But I think they do. I mean, if you're not interested in the geopolitics of North Africa, then you're fine. But just don't go there. Do you know what I mean?
Just don't go there, exactly.
Just make a film. But this is the problem with being English. Can I just say the problem with being English?
You get thrown in jail just for saying you're English.
The problem with being English is you get they put you in jail if you say you're English.
It's true.
It's true. If you're an English filmmaker, it's even worse.
Right.
If you're an English filmmaker, then you basically, for some bizarre reason, if you make films in England, you don't generally make them in this really kind of drab kitchen sinky way, or you are alienated by that and decide to make kind of beautiful films elsewhere and just kind of forget about the fact that you're English and just use, because that's what when the ships went aboard the Indian Sea, all those hundreds of years ago, when we were making our first marks on the global south, we essentially were a bit like that. Sorry, I'm being really like it's because I'm drinking, but I'm not obviously, I don't, who cares, like whatever, but
last orders
when it's lockdown, dude, I really want to go to the pub.
I will go to the pub so much. I'm so sorry for traumatizing you with that.
When you're a filmmaker and you are from a place and you immediately at the first opportunity just go somewhere else and kind of turn
the money to do it
and turn it into some sort of fantasy utopia, that's a bit colonial, because you're literally
the colonial imagination is alive and well there.
Yeah,
and you're not kind of insulating yourself from it by making it science fiction. In fact, you're making it worse, because the worst parts of the colonial imagination were the projection of fantasies upon the East, upon the Orient, to use like Said's term. So all you're doing is you're presenting a more streamlined, more whitewashed version of the fantasy.
Yeah.
The fantasy of the colonial imagination was the Racine and others of like the exotic, debauched East, which bore no relation to reality. The modern way of doing it is going, I've made a sci-fi and I've set it in North Africa.
It's kind of like what they did with Robert Aubrey Lowe, is that they don't really kind of take anything. I mean, it'd be fine if he was just an actor. Do you know what I mean?
He's not. He's a character they've invested. Ben Rivers and Ben Russell have invested in as an interesting person, but they've not actually pursued his identity or his. I don't mean identity in a big capitalized sense. I mean just him. There's he gets minor screen time in a film which really should be about him, which feels like a bit of a failure of the concept, really. But the elements like it's very beautifully shot, well done, you know how to hold a camera.
Dude, you recommend these films, man. I thought you liked them. Have I just talked you out of your
No. I enjoy watching Ben Rivers films. Like I said, I enjoy that they exist. I think they need to exist, but there are so many. They frustrate me because he's not got the imagination to carry the films through and the commitment to carry these films through to their more. There's like a layer beneath this, and he's not pushing the films through to that deeper layer. He's got all the elements are there. I'm the arts. I'm ACE. I'm Arts Council England. I'm going tick 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 tick. But he's not pushing it beyond that. There's a more interesting film in Spell to Water for Darkness. There's a more interesting film. We're going to talk about Adam Curtis next week.
Yes, we are. We're going to finish watching Can't Get You Out My Head.
In my head. Can we talk about the political compass for filmmakers?
Oh yes. So I'm in a WhatsApp group, in like a film club WhatsApp group, Zoom thing. Very locked down, and I was suggesting that filmmakers are all tops. There are no bottom filmmakers, or there are very few, and that most women filmmakers are tops because it's like Thatcher, with her like all male cabinet. They have to sort of go further to compensate in this male-dominated world. It's sort of a very loose take that I made on Zoom, and it led to. And then there was this other conversation about like tweeness and brutalness and tweeness, because we watched Daisies by Vera Chytilova, which the stock of that film has really fucking tumbled, I have to say. When she died, people fucking loved Daisies, but now, at least in terms of the circles I run in, Daisies, it's fucking gone out of the fuck. It
has, isn't it?
It's just so fucking annoying women just doing like just chopping up pieces of paper and pissing off old men, and
it's just quirky. It's the Wes Anderson
very Tumblr, it's very twee.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were saying we created this political compass between, or Igor, friend of the show, Igor, created this. It's very hard to explain a political compass on a podcast.
Everyone knows.
But the axis are no, but I mean just to where things are placed.
Yeah, top left, which is red.
Yeah,
you've got between. So brutal is the north point of the compass, twee is the bottom point of the compass, the right hand side of the compass or east is bottom, and the left hand side is top. So
so you're assessing filmmakers by their brutality or tweeness and by their topness or their bottomness.
Yeah, and
so Claude Lanzmann is brutal top, Peckinpah, Bresson, Herzog, they're towards brutal top. Fassbinder, I think, has erroneously been put in brutal bottom. I think he's a brutal top.
I don't put Ackerman there though.
You think she's a bottom?
No, she's definitely a top, but she's probably more towards twee.
Yeah,
she's more southerly than Igor has
true.
placed her on this map.
Joanna Hogg is a good example of like a slightly brutal, slightly bottom.
Joanna Hogg's definitely a bottom. Oh, actually, I don't know. I'm doubting myself while I'm saying that. Let's put it this way. So
Wes Anderson is a top twee. He's at the
top twee, 100%. Twee bottom. You've got Chytilova in the bottom right hand corner, very very far in the bottom right hand corner. Brutal bottoms, Fassbinder.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think he's. I
don't think that's true.
No, I expressed this on the WhatsApp.
I don't think Fassbinder could ever get it up. But you're doing that much coke. You're just not getting it up at all, to be honest. We've got Antonioni is a brutal top. I agree with that. I mean, it's difficult because you're talking about the output of the film and about their directing style.
Well, all the good filmmakers are brutal tops, basically.
Basically, what we've
basically just forget about everyone else.
Chart skews towards that, and I think it skews towards Igor's and your tastes. I'm very interested. Tati is a kind of top twee, which again, really agree with. There's moments where this chart is incredibly accurate. What I'm interested in is Sajid Ray in
bang in the middle between top and bottom.
Bang in the middle. Yeah, and between twee and
between
brutal.
Yeah, it's slightly towards twee than brutal, but yeah. Carl Y just below him, yeah.
But I said earlier, bottom brutal. Pishabong, yeah, 100% right. That's the most accurate.
Yeah, Pishabong's the total bottom. This isn't. But by the way, for listeners, this isn't a definitive statement on their sexual preference, although there may well be correlations, or
it's about the vibe you get from
notable
their
inversions, inverse correlations. But it's about your directorial approach, whether you're kind of sort of open and improvisatory and sort of like letting the kind of ideas happen. Like I think Ben Rivers is total bottom.
Twee bottom.
Disgustingly. Yeah, twee bottom I would call him.
No, I think Ben Rivers watches from the cupboard.
He's a cuck, so he's on a completely different grid.
Cuck. We need a cuck. We need a cuck.
We need a new axis
cuckness.
for cuckedness. How cucked are you? Are you in there?
Am I personally in there? No. I'm a brutal top.
We all want to be a brutal top. Everyone, yeah. Well, this podcast is like a podcast of brutal topness.
Brutal topness. That's true.
We are both tops, like quite sort of vulnerable, gentle tops, but like
you might don't confuse it between us. Don't make that mistake.
We're not really brutal, I wouldn't say. Neither of us have been in the army or anything like that. But so rivers, the rivers of blood. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm just saying things that sound familiar.
Yeah, you know these words. Remember these words.
So Ben Enoch video colonialism. I got it on Blu-ray. It was £12. I want my money back. It wasn't very good.
It's not too late to get your money back.
It's too late. I just spent
free Ralph. # free Ralph.
I just spent 37 quid on an out of print Fassbinder box set.
A box set is a good. £37 is good for a box set. £37 for one film is bad.
Well, it's not. It's kind of one film. It's a mini series. It's World on a Wire. You remember that one, the sci-fi.
Oh, World on a Wire, yeah.
So Conception, basically. All right, thank you for listening, listeners. Next week we're going to tackle Big Dog Adam Curtis, and we promise that we won't go too easy on him.
No, we won't. We promise. Scouts promise.
Bye-bye.
Bye.